On today's show, there was never a doubt that Donovan Mitchell was going to stay in Cleveland this summer. He told us that and so much more at Media Day. We react to everything from Media Day on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can check out the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you are subscribed. Basketball season is here. Media Day in the books for the Cavs. Training camp begins Tuesday at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. I will be there covering practice from Tuesday through Friday. So make sure you keep it locked here on Locked On Cavs for the latest with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you're watching this video right now, hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit the notification bell as well so you get the latest Locked On Cavs content as soon as it is available. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by FanDuel, and fans can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. I mentioned in the open, Donovan Mitchell wasn't going anywhere. And Donovan Mitchell, I think at Media Day on Monday, made that pretty well known. He was asked a number of questions about his extension, about the state of the Cavaliers. He talked for about 15 minutes with the assembled media at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And one of the first questions he was asked, I don't think it was the first question, but one of the first questions came from Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com. And Chris asked Donovan, why Cleveland? Why did you extend here, essentially? And Donovan talked about, and I think that this is something that's going to resonate with a lot of Clevelanders, but Donovan talked about not just, because I love playing with Darius Garland, or I think Jarrett Allen's awesome. He talked about Cleveland, the city, and he talked about how much he liked Cleveland. And he said, one of the things that he said was when he first got traded to Cleveland, said he told his mom, I really like it here. And then went on to say that excluding everything on the basketball floor that the Cavs have either going for them or maybe that Donovan didn't quite like as much, excluding all of that, just said, I love it here. He spoke today, as I record this on Monday, he spoke today as somebody who really truly does sound like they enjoy Cleveland, Ohio, that they want to be in Cleveland, Ohio. And he talked about putting down roots and it being something very special when you can put down roots in a place that you love. And I think that's something that now, I would expect Clevelanders to really start embracing Donovan Mitchell the way he deserves to be embraced, because he is, without question, an all-NBA talent, and we will talk about him, the basketball player, coming up in just a second here, but he is without a question an NBA, all-NBA talent. He's phenomenal. He's been on MVP ballots before. He has been, in my opinion, since he's been in Cleveland, he has been a top 10 player in basketball. Like, he's that good. And I think that there have been some Cleveland fans who have kind of tried to keep him at an arm's length, if you will. And it's not because of anything Donovan has done or not done. It's not because he hasn't been good enough or he has been better than expected. I think that there have been a lot of Cleveland fans that lived in fear that Donovan Mitchell was going to leave Cleveland at the first opportunity he had, that he was going to not sign an extension this summer, that he was going to request a trade. Obviously, he re-upped with the Cavs, and I think his comments today further solidified that this wasn't something that, there just weren't any better options. And sure, it's easy to be able to, and I think a lot of NBA players do this, where they have eyes elsewhere, they know what's going on in the league, they have friends on other teams. It'd be silly to think otherwise. But Donovan Mitchell spoke on Monday like someone who genuinely wants to be in Cleveland. And that, to me, I think should mean a lot for fans. That was the biggest thing that I took away from his availability is, wow, this guy really, truly does want to be here. He wants to set down roots here. He wants to be on the Cavs for a long time. I don't know if he's going to retire a member of the Cavs because that just feels so far down the road, and you can't predict the future to that extent. But I think Donovan Mitchell is going to be a Cleveland Cavalier for a long time. I think Cavs fans should be thrilled about that. I think we kind of learned that with the extension, but hearing him talk publicly for the first time since signing that, it affirmed everything that I thought. It made me feel as if, okay, this guy, he gets it. he wants to be in Cleveland. I don't think he's just saying these things either. I don't think Donovan Mitchell is going to sit up there and lie to us about how much he loves the city, because if he didn't, he wouldn't be here. He could have chose those other routes. He could have gone down the, I'm not going to sign an extension, going to see how it plays out, sort of force the Cavs' hands. But no, I think Donovan Mitchell genuinely is happy in Cleveland. And I think for Cavs fans, that's the best thing. Because now, after listening to him talk today, I think Donovan Mitchell is going to have a monster year for the Cavaliers. He talked a lot about his offseason. He talked a lot about how the way last year ended, a lot about Kenny Atkinson. But there are a few things that I heard from him today that make me feel as if he's going to have the best year of his career this year. So last year for him ended with an injury. He didn't finish the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Boston Celtics. He described it as something that was more of a wear and tear type injury. There wasn't anything that was structurally wrong with his knee, but it was more of a wear and tear type thing that plagued him throughout the year. Obviously, he had the calf issue as well at certain points. But he took a different approach this offseason, to where in the past for him, and he had been, exiting the playoffs at similar times throughout his career. So last year wasn't some new timeline for him. It wasn't as if he played deeper or didn't get as far into the playoffs as in the past. So that I do think is something to keep in mind here. But he said that he didn't really start going, I think the word he used was full bore into his basketball activities until the start of August, which is about a month later than he used to do that. He said the early part of his offseason, there was a lot of focus on strength training in the weight room, a lot of focus on stability, a lot of focus on taking care of his body. And he said, I'm not the youngest guy in the world anymore. He said, I'm not 22, but also I'm not 33 either, which obviously is true. Like, he's not somebody that's on a rookie contract still. He is a superstar. He's a face of the franchise. He's taking care of his body like one. And it's not to say that he hasn't in the past, because I think he's been in very good hands as far as his training staff goes throughout his career. But I think that taking a little bit of a different approach after playing so many minutes on a per game basis the last couple of years is going to be a really good thing for Donovan Mitchell. I think that we're going to see him play his best basketball of his career. The other thing that he mentioned that he didn't shy away from was that, this team, he believes that if they're healthy, they're a championship contender. That to me says that there are championship expectations. Maybe, if they don't win a title, as I've mentioned, I don't think that you have to look at this as a failure this year. But they expect to be with the Boston Celtics and the Knicks and the Sixers and the Bucks in the Eastern Conference. They expect to be in part of that tier, where they don't think that they're a tier below with the Magic and the Pacers. They think that they're up with those groups of teams that can win a title. I think Donovan Mitchell sounded really motivated on Monday. He sounded like somebody that is ready for this challenge. And when you pair that with the fact that, he's happy, very clearly, he's happy to be here. He's got an extension. One of the things I asked him was this sort of like a weight lifted off your shoulder, signing the contract extension? You don't have to think about it anymore. Your teammates don't have to be asked about it anymore. And just that is something that he mentioned can have a really big positive impact on the locker room. Because I do wonder if it may be the start of last year, people have ears, people listen to these things, and Donovan Mitchell's name was a hot one that kept coming up in rumors about where he could be, about where he could go after this year, because there's no way he stays in Cleveland, right? And I do wonder if that had any effect at all on the Cavs locker room last year. But that is something that's not going to exist. It's not going to exist anymore. And I think that creates a better basketball environment. And then one other thing, I've got two more things with Donovan. But one other thing, I do think we're going to see Kenny Atkinson get the most out of him. Kenny talked about making things easier for Donovan, and this kind of ties into what I want to talk about next in Evan Mobley. But I think the Cavs are going to be doing things to make Donovan Mitchell's life easier under Kenny Atkinson. I think the offense is going to be a much better fit for him than it was under JB Bickerstaff. And I do believe that should be something that Cavs fans are very excited about. That if Donovan Mitchell is going to be able to get easier baskets, that the communication with Kenny Atkinson is going to be as good as it seems to be so far. He mentioned, Kenny waking up in France at 4 a.m. to text him about slipping out of screens and best ways to go about certain things that he thinks Donovan can take advantage of. That is something that I think should really excite Cavs fans about this upcoming season. I think that is something that should absolutely be awesome because this team, they've got a lot of continuity. They've got a lot of really good pieces. There's not many bad basketball players, if any, on this basketball team by NBA standards. They should be really good. And I think Donovan Mitchell is going to have the best year of his career because of everything that I just mentioned. I think he's going to be phenomenal. I think that he's going to be somebody that we are talking about as a potential first-team All-NBA player. I think that kind of season is on the way for Donovan Mitchell. What kind of season is on the way for Evan Mobley? What do we learn about the fourth-year big man at Media Day? I'll tell you all that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is, as you know, America's #1 sports book. They've got everything that you could need, including the fact that the Cleveland Browns are 3-point underdogs on the road in Washington against the Commanders next Sunday. Not feeling great right now if you're a Browns fan, but you can feel better if you are a Browns fan because you can jump on FanDuel, bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That sounds like maybe not, the best thing for the Browns, but it's not a bad consolation prize when you have to watch football the way that we have to watch football in Cleveland right now. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, as you know. And when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, like maybe you did during the Sunday night game, you thought that Baltimore, this pains me, that Baltimore was going to just continue to beat the brakes off of Buffalo. So maybe you thought, okay, game starts off good. I think that Baltimore is going to cover a 7.5-point spread. You could bet that live, and you can rake in the winnings with FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and as I mentioned, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just head on over to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com today, and you can start gambling with America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen. Today and every day basketball season is back. Make sure you tell a friend to subscribe. You don't want friends to be without Locked On Cavs. I don't want you to be without Locked On Cavs. That's why I'm bringing you Locked On Cavs every day of the week. I will be off to Florida Monday night. So if you're listening to this Tuesday morning, or you might be listening to this Monday night because it will be posted, but if you're listening to this Tuesday morning, I'll be at Cavs practice. We'll have episodes all throughout the week, be able to do a lot of fun stuff down in Florida, get to talk some real basketball. I'm very excited for this training camp. But now that your first listen for the day is over, make sure you go check out Locked On NBA for your second listen of the day, because Media Day was all across the NBA on Monday. You want to know what's happening with more than just the Cavs, and Locked On NBA has you covered, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. So Evan Mobley, I thought, was the second most interesting guy to hear from on Media Day Monday at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And it's not because Evan Mobley says all this interesting stuff or that he's the most outgoing, engaging personality, because those things aren't true, and that's fine. They don't need to be true. But my first thought with Evan Mobley on Monday was, wow, he does look like he has added some weight. His arms look bigger. He walked behind Donovan Mitchell as Donovan was at his podium, and I caught a glimpse of him, and I just thought to myself, he looks like he's put on the cliche, I've added 15 pounds of muscle. Evan Mobley looks like that. His arms look bigger. He looks like somebody that is a little bit more ready to withstand being an NBA big man for 82 games plus the playoffs. So that was, I think, really good sign for Evan Mobley, #1. I'm very excited by that, because I do think, while he's never going to turn into someone the size of Nikola Jokic or, another just true big guy in terms of the size, he needed to add a little bit, I think, from what he was. I think he was playing a little bit underweight to play as much center as he needed to last year. That didn't mean he couldn't be good in those minutes, because he could be, but I don't think he was reaching his full potential. I think he has a better chance of reaching his full potential this year. And I think the fact that he's put on good weight, muscle, that he has taken the offseason seriously, again, not to say he hasn't in the past, but he looks like a different type of basketball player this year. I was very excited when I saw that. I think Cavs fans should be very excited for what can come down the track for Evan Mobley. And the other thing that I thought was really important to talk with Evan about, because we've heard, and I talked about this with the Kenny Atkinson show late last week after him and Kobe Altman spoke on Friday about how they're planning on using Evan offensively. And that was one of the things he was asked about. I think it was Jackson Flickinger of Fear the Sword that asked him the question. And he talked about how, he believes that he's going to be playing downhill more often, that he's going to be a playmaker, that he's going to be trailing in transition, that he's going to have the basketball in his hands more frequently than he had in the past. What does that sound like? That sounds like exactly what Kenny Atkinson said last Friday. So to me, whether or not those things come to fruition, I don't know. We have to see Evan do this on the floor in regular season NBA games before I think everyone's going to truly believe it and truly buy in. And I get that, and that makes sense, and that's fair. But the fact that Kenny Atkinson and Evan Mobley are on the same page as far as this goes, that I think is a really good sign. That is something that you needed. You need your new head coach and your soon-to-be superstar player be on the same page. Evan Mobley's got a gigantic jump that is available for him to take on the offensive side of the floor. But he has to do things right. He has to play the way that Kenny Atkinson wants him to play. But I see the vision there. I do. I think that this is going to, if this goes according to plan, Evan Mobley is going to be an all-star this year. You can hold me to that. Evan Mobley, if he has the type of season, if he follows the vision that Kenny Atkinson has for him, Evan Mobley is going to turn a lot of heads. He's going to surprise a lot of people. One of the things that Tristan Thompson said, he talked about, Evan should be an all-star this year. The goal for Evan Mobley should be to be an all-star and to win Defensive Player of the Year. I think Defensive Player of the Year might be a little bit of a lofty goal, and it's nothing against Evan. But what we've seen from Victor Wembanyama is pretty outrageous. So if that guy stays healthy, I just have a hard time believing he's not going to be the Defensive Player of the Year. But Evan Mobley as an all-star, I absolutely think that should be the goal. I think that's a fair goal. That's something Evan talked about briefly, that he wants to be an all-star. That should be the next step in his career. And I'm buying in on it. I am. I think that with what Kenny Atkinson wants him to do, the way that he talked about it, everyone else there that was asked about Evan talked about what a confident basketball player he is right now and how he just looks like something kind of clicked for him this offseason. Again, we need to see it on the floor in NBA games. We need to see it in regular season NBA games. But I wouldn't doubt that this is going to happen. And then the other thing that it makes me think of is, Kenny Atkinson talked about making life easier for Donovan Mitchell and getting Donovan easier baskets and putting him in better situations. What better way is there for that to happen than by Evan Mobley taking the next step, than Evan Mobley following this plan? Like, if Evan Mobley follows this plan correctly and does all of the things that Kenny Atkinson mentioned, that's going to make life so much easier for Donovan Mitchell. It is. He's going to be in a much better position offensively, because if Evan Mobley's in this playmaking role, if Evan Mobley is stretching the floor a little bit more, I still don't think he's going to be a super high volume 3-point shooter. But can he be a mid-volume 3-point shooter? Absolutely. Can he do that while playmaking, while getting out in transition more, while being in that trailer position in transition with the basketball in his hands, finding open shooters, playing 5 out? Can he do all those things and still stretch the floor a bit? Yeah, I think he can. I don't think that's an outrageous thing to think about. But the fact that they're on the same page, that Evan Mobley's answer almost exactly echoed what Kenny Atkinson said. I asked Kenny the question last Friday, and he gave almost the exact same response that Evan gave on Monday. That, I think, is a great sign. Like, those two clearly get it. And I think Evan, by the way he looked, he passed the eye test for me today. He really did. His arms look bigger. He didn't want to put a number on how much weight he's put on, but he passed the eye test. He looks like somebody that is ready to attack this season. I think Cavs fans, if you've still got Evan Mobley stock, and I think that you should, now's the time to buy more. I'm buying the Evan Mobley breakout season coming. I think it's going to be here. And I don't want to be easily convinced. I don't want to act like it's just because of media day. I've always been a big Evan Mobley believer. But after listening and seeing him today, it's hard for me to imagine that Evan Mobley is not going to have a great season. I really think he is. I think that the best of Evan Mobley is yet to come. I think that we're going to start seeing more and more glimpses of it, and they're going to stop being glimpses this year, and they're going to be the standard. They're going to start to be what we see from Evan Mobley on a regular basis. I was impressed with how he looked today. I can't wait to see what it looks like on the basketball floor. I think Cavs fans are going to be really excited. The third most interesting guy we heard from, one of Kenny Atkinson's old friends, Jarrett Allen. He talked about his rib injury last year, talked about signing an extension in Cleveland this year, and so much more. Going to dive into that next as we wrap up today's Locked On Cavs. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Make sure you hit a 5-star rating for us wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed. Let's grow Locked On Cavs so I can do more stuff like go cover training camp in Florida. I want to bring you guys the best Cavs content available. That's how we do it. But for your second listen, go check out Locked On NBA as they recap a lot from the NBA world that took place on Monday. But today I want to wrap up the show by talking about Jarrett Allen's comments. So he, like everyone else on the roster, spoke for between 10 and 15 minutes at a podium on Monday. And one of the things that came up with him was his rib injury. We know that he injured his rib in Game 4 against the Orlando Magic first round series, missed the entire rest of that series, and did not play against Boston in the 5-game loss the Cavs had in the Eastern Conference semifinals. We also know that his former teammate, Marcus Morris Sr., went on somebody's podcast. I don't remember whose podcast it was, and I'm sorry. But he basically questioned Jarrett Allen's toughness and said, if it were him, he would have been playing through it. And Jarrett said he did hear those comments. He understood where Marcus Morris Sr. was coming from, but he wasn't offended by them. And he basically talked about how he didn't realize how bad a rib injury hurts until you get it. He said it was something that he had trouble breathing, he had trouble sleeping. When he gets a CT scan, like there's still a piece of bone that's sort of floating around in that area of him. So it does seem like this rib injury that he had was a little bit more soreness than just the rib contusion that was put on the injury report during the playoffs last year. And he mentioned, I used to think guys that had rib injuries were soft, like it's something that you should be able to play through. And then I got one, and I realized I was wrong. That's basically the way that he framed it. That this was something he did not realize how painful, how uncomfortable that this type of injury was. And then he had it, and it took him, he said he wasn't back to normal for even a few weeks after the season ended. Like it was a long recovery for him. So that was thing number one. I asked him about his contract extension because, obviously all three guys I've talked about today signed contract extensions with the Cavs this summer. And Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen. Jarrett said he loves Cleveland, that he just genuinely likes the city. This is the place that he wants to be. He didn't have to sign a contract extension this summer. I still think financially for him, it didn't make a ton of sense to sign a contract extension this summer because I think he could have made more money when he reached free agency a couple of years from now. But he said Cleveland's a place that he wanted to be, and he trusts this organization, and he appreciates the fact that this organization trusts him. From where the Cavs were when he first got here, if you think back to when the Cavs traded for Jarrett Allen, they weren't very good. He was sort of, I think, the big piece that changed things. Now, we can talk about Evan Mobley, too, and that just how the Cavs have been good ever since he's been on the team. But I think having Jarrett Allen at the end of the year before was a big thing that helped the Cavs sort of progress and take that next step, which is a big reason why they were good in the Lowry Markkanen year, where they won 44 games. I think Jarrett Allen was a big part of that. But he loves Cleveland. This is where he wants to be, and I think that's a really refreshing thing to hear. I do. Donovan said it. Jarrett said it. I think that's a really cool thing to hear. And then the other thing with Jarrett Allen that we know is that he's played for Kenny Atkinson before. This is who he started playing with when he was in Brooklyn. Atkinson was his head coach. And one of the things that stuck out to me about that is he was asked about their relationship, and he brought up the fact that when, Kenny was resigned or was fired from Brooklyn, it didn't work out, went out west, coached with the Clippers, was with the Warriors. He said the two would always keep in touch, that Kenny was such a good coach to him and somebody who believed in him so much that he always appreciated it. Whether Kenny was out west coaching with either Golden State or the Clippers, he would send Jarrett text messages like, hey, I'm proud of you. Or, I think you're doing great. This is awesome. Stuff like that. Like little, I don't want to say pep talks, but words of affirmation, if you will, for Jarrett Allen from Kenny Atkinson. And I do think that for as good as Jarrett Allen was last year, and I thought he deserved to be an all-star. I thought he deserved to be on the Eastern Conference All-Star team last year. I think it's possible Kenny Atkinson can get more out of him. I think so. That's not a shot at JB Bickerstaff. I don't know how many coaches there are that can get more out of Jarrett Allen. I sort of think he's a player that's close to his ceiling. But if there's a guy that can get more out of him, I think Kenny Atkinson is probably the guy to do it. I do. I'm very excited to see what he looks like. He said he doesn't know, what he's exactly going to look like in this offense. Things going to have to look a little bit different than they did in Brooklyn because the Cavs have two bigs and the Nets did not. But he, like everybody else, seemed very excited to play for Kenny Atkinson. The last thing I want to touch on today, George Yang was the first guy to get to a podium, a friend of Locked On Cavs, George Yang. And he was asked, I believe it was Nick Paulus of ESPN Cleveland who asked this, but he said, is this the best team that you've ever been on? And George Yang has been on some good teams. In Philly, in Utah, he's been on some good teams. And he thought that this team is the most talented one that he's been part of. And yes, I think that's setting expectations very high. But everything that I've heard today, everything that I've heard Friday, everything that I've heard from the Cavs as this season begins, the goal should be the Eastern Conference Finals at minimum, if not more. This team is really good. I think this team's going to get the best year of Donovan Mitchell's career. I think Evan Mobley is going to be outstanding. I see no reason why the Cavs cannot be grouped with the other four great teams in the East. I think the Eastern Conference Finals should be the goal. I have zero doubt about that. That's what this organization should be aiming for. What I'm aiming for is for you to make Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. So thank you to those that do every day. If you don't every day, basketball season is here. You're going to want to start hearing about the Cavaliers every single day. I will be here. Locked On Cavs coming at you 5 days a week, sometimes 6, maybe sometimes 7, depending on what's going on. But I will be in Florida covering training camp, IMG Academy. Super pumped to talk actual basketball. The season is finally here. So thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today. And every day, check us out on YouTube. If you haven't, just search Locked On Cavs. Hit that thumbs up button, click the notification bell, and make sure you're subscribed. And I will talk to you tomorrow.